takes somebody like me that understands the community to be like, okay, you don't want anybody to know that your kid has a drug issue, right? You don't want to tell anybody that he's committing crimes. Okay, that's understandable. We want to conceal our sins from everybody. But when we look at drugs, like drug use, okay, what are we gonna do?
I might randomly drug test you, and it's not because I don't trust you or I think anything is going on. It's just a system that I've implemented and I've seen what's out there. This is how I'm gonna make sure my family.
But
safe.
I think just having that conversation that you just had is gonna.
He gets that there's a story behind it. There's a person behind it. It's not just a case number. The problem again becomes when you have a prosecutor who just treats it as it's on my desk. Let me get rid of it.
Hussein and Umar with me. Umar is a Wayne County prosecutor. Hussein is a defense attorney. What's going on, guys? How you doing?
What's going on?
What's going on, brother? Thanks for having us.
I appreciate you guys coming on. So, you guys come from two different parts of the law world, right? You're going after the bad guys. You're defending them, right?
We're on two sides of the spectrum, you could say.
Defending the rights.
I like it. I like it. So we get a little perspective from both sides. So,
absolutely.
Being, I guess, having that perspective of both sides of the aisle, right? Something I always found interesting is there's like a delicate balance between over prosecution, right? Or just in general, right? Putting too many bad guys. Would you rather over prosecute and put innocent people in jail? Or would you rather under prosecute and have guilty people walking free, right? And I think it's impossible to get it perfectly right, but that's your job, is to get it as accurate as we can, right?
Yeah, that's. I think that's a good representation of it. I think as my role in a prosecutor, ultimately we're here to represent the people of the state of Michigan. So deterrence, being able to be the advocate for the victims, is our number one thing. On the defense side, I think Bazzi could speak to this a little bit.
So it's interesting that you would bring that up. It is a delicate balance, right? But you get to a point where when you're too extreme on either side, okay, it's detrimental, right, to society. And, there's a question that's always posed, how many innocent individuals being locked up is too many, right? And obviously I would say even one is too many.
I agree.
That being said, I understand and I accept the difficulties of the prosecution side of things, right? And I get that. What is that perfect balance? I don't know. I don't think that because you have to think about it. If it's, let's just say it's that one individual, okay, innocent and is convicted, right? If that's your loved one, or if that's your friend,
100%.
somebody what's the impact on the family? What's the impact?
I always thought about it as if I think having one innocent person in jail is a lot worse than having one guilty person run free. But the problem is that guilty person can cause another victim, right?
Yep.
Seek out another victim. So it's a very delicate balance.
Yeah,
so that's why
I don't think there's any perfect. No system is perfect, right? When you look at any system that we have in America today, but I think the most important thing is the individuals that play the role. Bazzi that plays a defense attorney, myself that plays a prosecutor. It's important that every time I pick up a file and I prosecute, I got to remember that there's a family behind that file, that there's a soul behind that file. So you got to be able to work with integrity, work with passion, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to be as productive as possible.
Do you ever find that you get lost in the case and you forget that? Is that something that you find that you have to kind of rebalance yourself? Because you get caught up with the case, the details, the job, then you forget that there's people's lives at stake.
It's difficult, I mean, sometimes when you look at a case, you're like, okay, you have all these variables. You look and read through all of the evidence and you tell yourself, okay, I got a strong case, right? But it's important for you to be delicate in the situation and look finely through each aspect of the case, whether it's talking to an extra witness or taking that extra time to understand the facts or the circumstances surrounding the case. So for me, I think putting in that extra work is going to allow you to understand, like, okay, I've checked all the boxes I know based on myself, on the ability that I have, that I'm doing the right thing here, because it's never about the conviction for the prosecutors. And there's this huge misconception. People be like, oh, it's all about the numbers. They're trying to pack the record, right? Yeah. It's all about this conviction rate, but it's never that. It's about doing the right thing at all costs. That's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Now, the thing is, Omar is different, and I say that honestly because Omar will pick up a file and he'll acknowledge everything he just said. I think that sometimes prosecutors may become overwhelmed, right? And they start treating files as just case numbers and let's keep the files moving, right? And, sometimes, you have individuals who are lost in that.
Right.
When I say individuals, I mean defendants, right? And we're specifically talking about the criminal justice system. Now, that being said, I know Omar, he does bring a bit of compassion. He brings a tremendous amount of integrity, right? When he prosecutes, he's going to do the right thing,
Right.
or at least what he believes to be the right thing in that time, or in that moment, rather. So I think to answer your question, in terms of how do we work towards that balance, you have individuals who are prosecuting who understand the ramifications of the prosecution itself, right? You bring charges. See, what people don't understand is that an individual who's charged, first of all, it's innocent until proven guilty,
100%.
right? Okay. Well, when you're charged with a serious crime, like a CSC, for example, criminal sexual conduct, all right, there's a perception in the public view, in the public eye, when you come to court, that, oh, he must have did it, or, oh, why else would he be charged if he didn't, et cetera, right? Aside from that, you also have the defendant that had to come to court, take a day off of work. Maybe we had to come back to court, rather, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, right? So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days off of court. In between each hearing is the stress. Keep in mind, nobody's convicted yet.
Right.
It's just charged, right? In between each hearing is the stress of coming back, wondering what's going to happen, what's going to come of this. Now, and I'm telling you that I've had clients who were innocent, and I have clients who are innocent, and we had to fight and advocate and do what it is that we're supposed to do, okay? But even at the end of the road, we get a favorable result. I mean, the impact on the individual is, I can't even begin to explain it to you, man, okay? And like Omar acknowledges it. He understands that, right? So like I was saying earlier, when he picks up that file, he gets that there's a story behind it. There's a person behind it. It's not just a case number. The problem, again, becomes when you have a prosecutor who just treats it as it's on my desk, let me get rid of it. Any means necessary.
Right, and I think that goes to your duty of service, right? Like we come into these positions, to be a prosecutor, you're not here for the money, right?
Right.
You're not here to do this because you're going to get this big check at the end of the day. You're doing this for public service, right? To protect and give a voice for the victims. And Bazzi has a point. It's a great deal of responsibility when I pick up a file or I read a set of facts before I make that charging decision, right? Because this is significantly going to impact somebody's life. So it's important for you to not only have the passion for the job, but have the hard work ethic to look at it and be like, listen, I did all my due diligence. I'm here, I'm ready, and I believe in this case, and I'm going to sign it, right? And you're also right. We are overworked, right? There's a lot of prosecutors' office across the country that deal with a large caseload, and we don't have as much time as we should have in order to review all the cases. But I think if you put in the work, you know what I mean, regardless of however long it takes, you know what I mean? I think you ultimately come out with a favorable outcome for the victim. And, with the defense attorneys, we always have that opportunity to negotiate and figure things out.
And that's twofold, just so let's make it clear. The defense attorneys, we also have an obligation to exercise diligence, right? To go through the discovery, provide it to the client, right? Bring the client into the office, explain step by step what's going on. Explain to them what like on a felony, what an arraignment is, what a PCC is,
right,
what an exam is. Strategically make a decision as to whether or not to hold the exam. I mean, generally, my firm, our firm, we hold the majority of our exams, right? And we do it so that we can build a record. That way, once we get to circuit court, we can file appropriate motions, right? But you got to put in that work. You can't just pick up the file on our side and say, okay, what's the quickest way to resolve this for the client?
Right.
Because there's what's called collateral consequences, right? Even if you secure, let's say you enter into a plea agreement, all right? And there's probation for 6 months or a year, and then it's done, right? Client gets to go on with their lives. Forget the severity of the crime. The client has to make a decision ultimately as to how they want to proceed, right? But when they make that decision, it has to be made knowingly, voluntarily, willingly. And a part of that, for example, we have individuals who have immigration issues. When you take a plea, no matter how great it seems, if you're not a citizen, depending on what you plead to, you could be looking at deportation, right? So you have an obligation. You have to exercise diligence, explain it to the client, maybe connect the client with an immigration attorney. If you don't, for example, I don't practice immigration. I would connect my client on a criminal case with an immigration attorney to go through and explain, here's what the potential outcome can be, not only by accepting the plea and the punishment that follows, but also what's called collateral consequences.
Right.
You know, and so I think diligence is probably such a key part, man. In the world of lawyering, diligence. You know?
So you got to be able to put in that work, man. If you're not here to put in that work and work with integrity and work with passion, this is not the job for you.
So it comes back to what the people say, the beauty of the law, right? Where you have to prove without beyond reasonable doubt that this person did this or committed this crime or is guilty of whatever they're being charged with. And that's like the art behind it. And, being judged by a jury who all 12 have to be convinced that you're, and it's great on paper. And I think that's what makes America great in general is this process, this, due process. But then you get into the messiness of, not everybody has integrity, right? And I'll give you an example. A friend, not a friend, but a family member years ago went through an issue where his employees were caught breaking the law, right? Doing something through the, so they were caught up in some fraud scheme. And the family member of mine was basically the business owner, so they tried to pin it on him. And all the video footage that they had was only of employees. And it went through this whole trial process. They were going after, a bunch of businesses in the area. And the prosecutor, she was a, for lack of a better word, piece of shit. But, she was out there to get blood. And in discovery, they ended up finding, before trial, this is all before trial, they didn't end up going to trial, but they found that the what's it called was, I don't know if this is allowed, but they had a few videos that they didn't share.
No, that's called
They didn't turn over?
exculpatory evidence.
They didn't turn over. And the judge said this case should be thrown out immediately. Somehow the prosecutor goes, talks to the judge in the chambers, comes out, we'll still go forward with this. But the videos that they did show were multiple employees saying, I can't do this, I'll be fired, which is proof that this is not part of their, you know what I mean? Like,
they're not implicated in the criminal activity.
That the owner had nothing to do with this, because why would you be fired if the owner is allowing you to do this? And from here, they ended up they came to a plea agreement, and I still think that.
And listen, man, don't get me wrong. Like, the prosecutors play a huge role in the criminal justice system, but it's also important to note that you have the defense attorneys who are also playing a critical role, and you have the judge that's also playing a critical role.
No, of course, but
so it's not only the prosecutor that's wielding all this power in court.
No,
yes,
of course, but when the prosecutor at the end of the day, after the plea agreement, walks up to the defendant and says, "You got away with this. You're lucky," meaning you still had no evidence on them, right? You already got the employees. You already have them.
Right, right.
They're locked tight, but you want the head. I don't know, this is like a RICO charge or whatever the hell you're trying to go after,
Right.
but it just shows that it was personal rather than trying to actually get justice.
And I can understand that. I mean, listen, I don't know the details of that case.
Of course. I'm just giving you a rough.
But from my experience with the prosecutors that work in our office, I think, I've come across a lot of graceful prosecutors that mentored me and actually showed me.
And I believe there are definitely good prosecutors out there.
But there are those ones. Don't get me wrong. I think in every system, none of the systems
100%.
are perfect. It's the same thing that we deal with law enforcement, right? There's some of those bad actors that give, you know what I mean, the rest of law enforcement a bad
100%,
image.
100%,
Right?
I
They're not the
agree.
majority.
Right.
Right. And we shouldn't stigmatize them. But
Of course.
you're absolutely right. There are those bad actors that give us a bad name.
My point was of how much power the prosecuting office really has.
Absolutely.
So it is a responsibility
It's a
for
great
you to
responsibility.
apply it in the right way, where it is justice rather than
Right.
you think you're like the only sheriff in town, and your job is to just take everybody out.
But we also play the key role when it comes to public safety. We are the ones that keep the community safe. So
of course.
it's our job, in order for us to keep the community safe, to keep our children safe. So we don't get it right all the time, right? But the majority of the time, I think we do get it right. I think we do prosecute in a way that dignifies, the community at large. So I think I could see where you're coming from, but I also understand that there's those nuanced cases that, we could do better. And so there's always room for improvement in any system.
To be fair to her, right? She probably had 10, 15 of these cases. All these business owners were corrupt in this money scheme, right?
Right.
You kind of set your lens that these guys are all corrupt, and rather than go based what's called you're just out there to get.
But see,
can
I think
understand
it's important for even as prosecutors to look past that. You know
Right.
what I mean? And I think that's what differentiates between a good prosecutor and maybe somebody that's not in it for the, you could say, for the love of it or the passion of it, is because yeah, you got to look through the smoke screen sometimes. Sometimes we're so headstrong on we believe this guy did it. We're gonna do whatever we want. We have our confirmation bias.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That affects the case, but it's not a game of numbers for us, right? It's about doing the right thing all the time. That's just how it is, or how it should be.
All right. So, as a defense attorney, hearing that, would like, and again, this guy, my relative had amazing attorneys. He did, they did their job. But it came to a certain point where the attorneys came to him and said, "Hey, listen, this is the best you're gonna get. Like, at this point, the case should have been thrown out, but judge doesn't want to throw it out, so just we don't want to go to trial. Avoid trial at all costs." Where do you? And I've seen this even on a criminal side, right, where it's young people get caught up with the wrong thing. The attorney says, "Let's avoid trial. Take this deal."
So, okay. I get the question. Well,
I guess how delicate is it to try to avoid trial?
it's not.
Versus,
It's not though. It's not. That's the thing that I think there's a common misconception that defendant, specifically with criminal cases, defendant doesn't have the option to try his or her case, right? In reality, sometimes clients will say, "Hey, listen, I understand the defenses. I get what we're doing here. I get what you're telling me, but I'm tired.
Right.
I'm tired." And you try and support the client, and tell the client, "Listen, I get that you're tired, but here's how I feel about your case. Here's what I think the potential outcomes can be. If convicted, here's what you could be looking at. Here's, the plea agreement that's currently on the table. This is what it is."
Right.
And sometimes, just to go back to your point, I guess, or your question, sometimes a client will say, "I'm making a business decision," right? You're a business guy, right? And you understand. Sometimes clients will try and limit their risk and their exposure by doing something that maybe they don't feel is absolutely the right thing to do in the form of taking that plea agreement or whatnot. As defense attorneys, right, our job, obviously, if an offer is made by a prosecutor, I have an obligation to then turn around and tell the client, here's what they're offering. I'll give my professional opinion, and I tell the client, this is in your hands. I'll give you an example, actually. There was a case in Oakland County that I had. All right, this is about a year ago or so. And, there was a Cobb's agreement. A Cobb's agreement is when the judge essentially says, if you plea, this is what I will sentence you to. All right? So the client, the client was in the courtroom. He heard what the judge said. And then we proceeded to spend the next maybe 3 or 4 hours in the hallway, because he told me, I explained his defenses. I thought he had very strong defenses in that particular case. It was a gun case. And there was an issue as to whether or not he was possessing the firearm in the vehicle he was operating. The vehicle wasn't registered to him. And I remember this case because the client left a pretty lasting impression on me, to be honest with you. The point is, we spent 3 or 4 hours in the hallway at the Oakland County Circuit Court, 1200 North Telegraph, right? And I told him, look, man, and he had his mom there, his aunt there. I'm sorry, not his mom, his grandmother. His mom, unfortunately, had passed away when he was young. And I said, take your time and think this through. I will sit here until the end of the docket if I have to. You take your time, you think about it, you tell me what you want to do, and you have the option to try the case, to take the Cobb's agreement, to do whatever it is that you want to do. Now, we can't influence a client, because here's the problem. And let's say I did think that he had strong defenses, right? But the issue is, you never know. You put it in the hands of the jurors. So let's say you proceed to trial, and I talked the client out of a plea, right, which secured him, what was viewed at the time as a great outcome, all right, and it still is. What happens if he's convicted and the judge now goes above what was originally on the table?
That's on you.
It is, right? Yeah. And you can kind of run and hide from it, and say, well, no, you're the one that said you wanted to proceed. But if you not unduly, but if you influence the client one way or another, right, and then ultimately you bear that responsibility.
100%.
And that goes both ways, just so you're aware, right? And that's why I say it's the client's decision. Plea, try the case, whatever it is the client wants to do. We have an obligation to explain what they could do, what the possible outcomes could be.
So basically, just I'll help them make an informed decision the best you can.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I mean, like I said, I think it's important for, the defense attorneys have conversations. Bazzi will come have a conversation with me here. These are the pros I see of the case. Here are the cons. Here what I see is the issue with the case.
Right.
What do you think? And I think that ultimately goes to the negotiation process of whether or not a plea should be given or availed, and whether or not they should accept the plea, right? But at the end of the day, I think it's important for the prosecution and defense to have that relationship, right? Because it's always about coming to a favorable outcome, not only for like his client, but society at large, right? Because we don't want to be out here persecuting people. Right. We want to prosecute things within the confines of the law, and that's ultimately what my role is as a prosecutor.
So let me ask you: have you guys ever gone up against each other?
So the story with Bazzi is the first time I met Bazzi was in court, right? We had like a fiery exchange in a case, right? It was actually a very interesting case, to say the least. But at first I thought he was an asshole. You know what I mean? He came to me, it was a case in Dearborn Heights. I thought he was the biggest asshole, but we were in court. We zealously advocated on behalf of both of our sides of the case. And I think afterwards we just gained this huge respect for each other. You know what I mean? And it's a relationship that's flourished. I've had an opportunity, and I'm blessed to have gotten to know him and his family. So it's never personal for us. You know what I mean? You go to work, you got a case, you do what you got to do. If we can come to a resolution, we can. If not, we got to do what we got to do in court. You know what I mean?
Best friendship to make is the one that starts off with a fight.
Yeah, man, I respect the grind. I respect
100%.
going in there and advocating and doing what you got to do. That's what I love.
Let me ask you this: who won?
So I think
He won the battle. I won the war on that one in particular. I won the war, but he won the battle.
I agree. That's a proper representation. That was a very interesting case.
All right.
But let me just say, I do respect Omar a tremendous amount, and part of the reason is it goes back all the way to the beginning of our conversation. I mean, the guy just works with the utmost integrity, and he does the right thing. Omar he'll put together some of the more complex cases I've ever seen. Omar works what's called out county, and he can maybe explain that to you. So Omar covers I don't know how many cities. I can't even count. I feel like I've seen him in every city I've worked in, but I've been to court in rather. The point is, you want to talk about somebody that does it the right way, right? And to his comment about it's not personal, it really isn't, right? Because we have a relationship, a personal relationship, but we make sure that at no point in time does the personal relationship bleed into what we do for a living, right? I have a job to do, and I'm gonna do it, to the best of my ability, and I'm gonna do what's in my client's best interest, and Omar's gonna do the same thing with respect to what he does. He's a prosecutor. He's going to prosecute, right? But a key is he's not gonna persecute. Okay, he's gonna do his job, but he's gonna do it the right way, and he's
100%.
gonna look at the file. He's gonna read through it.
That's really difficult to do, to balance that out. But to be honest, I mean, it's honorable because you have a responsibility to the public and you have a responsibility to your client.
Right.
And you can't let
there's a fine line. It's difficult to juggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But I think
100%.
we do our best in order to keep it clean. You know what I mean? And like I said, we're doing this for, at least me, I'm doing this for the people of the state of Michigan. I want to make sure everybody's safe, right? I want to make sure victims have voices. And Bazzi does it to represent his client, you know what I mean? So it's a back and forth, it's a give and take. He probably doesn't agree with some of the things that I do. I don't agree with some of the things he says, but at the end of the day, we come together and the judge makes a decision, a jury makes a decision on whether or not he believes I'm right or he's right. So
100%.
It's a fair process, you know what I mean? And it's the best process, and it's the reason why America is so prosperous.
100%. And as just a common person outside of the law, I feel like we do have a great, due process system, but, there's times where as a regular person, you feel like you really can't put too much trust into it, because it's not that I don't trust the system. I don't trust people, right? And the system is made up of people, right? So there's the games of the law that you play, right? Whenever you have jury selection, right? It's everybody's trying to teeter it off to their side and trying to, you know what I mean? And you hear the O.J. Simpson case, and you hear if you watched How to Make a Murder or Making a Murder on Netflix, which was a great documentary, but I still don't know if he did it or not. But there's a lot of examples out there of cases where it's so ambiguous and it's kind of left up to people, right? As opposed to, because if everything was black and white, your jobs would be made so much easier, wouldn't it? You know?
Absolutely.
The law
Or we
is
wouldn't
all-
even need you.
The law is
is-
changing rapidly all the time. You know what I mean? So you got to stay in tune with what's changing, the new case laws, all the new Supreme Court cases that are coming out. So it's a constant learning, it's a constant learning curve for us, for sure. You know,
And the law is almost always a gray area.
100%.
Especially, I mean, there's always two sides to argue, right? Every opinion, every piece of case law that we use can be interpreted, two ways. And it is, because that's what we do. When we're briefing issues, when we're filing motions, we're talking about the same law. It's just two different interpretations.
Right.
And whether or not it applies to the facts and
person.
circumstances. Yeah.
There's always a side to argue. Sometimes even with Bazzi, like I'll be like, man, how did you come up with this argument? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a lot different. And I think it's different too when you're like prosecuting in specific communities, because you have to deal with the demographic, right? Like in some of the cities that I cover, and Bazzi does a lot of work in Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. You have our own community that has their own issues, you know what I mean, that you have to tackle and you have to prosecute. So you have to come at it with, it's very delicate, right? So you have to come at it at a different angle. We have a lot of, our communities deal with a lot of substance abuse problems, with a lot of domestic violence issues, right? And it's very taboo. Not a lot of people want to speak about it. Everything is hush hush, which is, it's not productive for us. It's not productive for me, because at the end of the day, I want to help, right?
And to be fair with that, that's something, I know me and you had a discussion about that a while back. It's something that I put a lot of thought into, and you put yourself in their shoes, right? Your son committed suicide because of mental health issues. Now, do you do the right thing and publicly speak about it and educate people on what caused it and how they can prevent their child, which is the greater good, right? How to prevent that, and it's a real deep issue in our community. Or here's a family that just went through the most brutal pain that you can imagine and think of, and the last thing they want to do is air out their dirty laundry.
Right. But at the end of the day, and I look at it from a different perspective. I think taking that approach is, you don't want anybody to know. I think it's a very selfish approach.
It is.
But
I'm coming at it from a point of, do you understand why they're being selfish about it?
Absolutely. And it takes somebody like me that understands the community to be like, okay, you don't want anybody to know that your kid has a drug issue, right? You don't want to tell anybody that he's committing crimes. Okay, that's understandable. We want to conceal our sins from everybody. But when we look at drugs, like drug use, okay, what are we gonna do? I have a case, or I've had plenty of cases where I'll speak to, like, there's a Yemeni family. The son would have an opioid addiction, right? I'll speak to the mother. The mother would approach me. She's telling me he's going to be okay. I ask her, hey, there's this inpatient facilities. He can go there for a year, try to get help. And, it's going to help him move forward and better himself. She's like, no, I'm going to take him to Yemen for a year. He'll come back. But she takes him to Yemen. He comes back, and he's committing crimes, right? So she tells me one time it got to the point where he stole all of her gold, right? He stole all of her gold to fund his habit. So in action, she has good intentions. She wants her son to get better, and she doesn't want anybody to know. But is this productive? Are you enabling him at this point?
I think
you absolutely are.
No, I hear you out, definitely. I think it's the hope, right? It's the hope that, if my son will get better, and he will change his life and turn it around. And the less people know, the less this becomes public, the more he can have a productive life afterwards, right?
Right.
Whereas you're right. Don't put too much, into the hope of making it better, but focus on the actual problem.
Exactly.
Right?
Because at the end of the day, it's your son, it's your daughter, you know what I mean? It's your husband, whoever the relationship that you have with that individual, right? So when we look at it in the larger picture, right, we want to make sure these individuals get the help that they need. Concealing it is not going to do anything. It's not going to be beneficial for either party, And
that's tough in the Arab American community. It really is.
It is.
It's tough to say, because you're right. At the end of the day, it's like, would you rather have a son who has a tainted reputation, which is what they're all afraid of, aib, right? So you have a tainted reputation, or would you rather have a son at all, right?
Absolutely.
He's going to overdose. He's going to end up losing his life, go to prison. So focus on what's more important.
And the thing is about drug use that people don't understand is that when we look at criminal activity at large, the common denominator with all of the criminal activity is drug use.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it starts off as, a kid that's being curious, he pops a Percocet because he's around his friends and he thinks that's what he wants to do. He's having this identity crisis. He pops a pill. Right next thing you know, it's a habit, 2-3 a day, then he's taking a whole bunch of them, right? Then
I don't
he's
think-
going down this rabbit hole.
Speaking as a pharmacist, I don't think people understand, because it's so easy to judge, right? This person is a drug addict, he's just a criminal. Where they don't understand that someone on these pills, their thought process, their impulsiveness,
Tainted.
it's all changed through the substance. Not that they want to.
They're a
but
shell of themselves.
Exactly. Their ability to really think through right and wrong has become diminished. So they do need help, and they do need,
What's interesting is that a lot of drug users, right, like serious drug users who have a substance abuse problem, they'll have contact with the criminal justice system, right? They'll have contact with the prosecutor, with the defense attorney, with the judge, maybe with a probation officer, law enforcement, obviously. And I think it's key that we have in place mechanisms by which we can help these individuals get better. And to your guys' point, you need to have the willingness, right, on the other side to accept the help, to engage in the help, to participate in the help. Because, there are a number of programs. There's what we have, what's called drug court, for example. There's a number of ways where individuals with substance abuse problems who are charged criminally, they can complete these programs, and they don't do any kind of custodial sentence or term, right? So they're out of custody the entire time. It's like a probationary period. And sometimes they're pretty stringent programs, right? It's very hard to.
So I can speak on that behalf of as being a pharmacist and as having seen drug abuse.
And let me make this point, okay? Because I think it's important before you make the
go
segue
ahead.
into like the medical professionals. The medical professionals play a huge role in the opioid crisis. Okay,
100%.
Misprescribing these kids
Just
that
like
are
there's
coming to
bad
these clinics.
just like there's bad prosecutors,
Absolutely.
there's bad pharmacists.
Absolutely,
and,
and
bad
I
doctors.
think
100%.
they play a huge role in the opioid crisis.
So they do. You see a lot of bad practices as a pharmacist firsthand. So you'll see the drug addicts coming to get the drugs, seek out the drugs, and you'll see the prescribers who do no due diligence, and you'll go at it with them. Hey, I don't believe you prescribed this medication properly. I don't believe that this, there's red flags you seek out as a pharmacist, and you'll see the holy trinity, 3 different medications that are prescribed all together that are all, sought out by drug addicts, right? For instance, you'll see a benzo prescribed with an opioid prescribed with a muscle relaxer.
Right.
Those are like, what was referred to as a holy trinity. And it's like, what are you doing as a doctor, as a physician? Your patient seeking this out, and then they'll throw in a couple of random meds just to kind of let it go under the radar.
And I think, and I've worked a lot of cases with pill mills. You know what I mean? And it's
guys
unfortunate because these doctors swear an oath to protect the community. Anytime I go to a doctor and I speak to a doctor and he recommends me to take a pill, brother, I put my faith in you, right? I put my faith in you
100%.
because I'm a layperson and I don't understand the medical consequences of taking these pills.
You say that, and actually I'm reminded of my 4th year in pharmacy school. I was at a hospital doing a rotation around, and there was an elderly patient. She was being discharged. So I'm in the pharmacy filling her meds, and they prescribed Norco, modern day Vicodin. And it's an opioid, and it was, 3 weeks supply or something like that. And I deliver the medication to her, and I'm like, let me just have this discussion with her, I'm like, I'll go above and beyond. How bad is your pain? And now, technically, as a student, right, that's not my job to come in. But I said, I'm going to have this conversation with her. And she said, well, it's really not that, it's not that bad. I'm like, do you understand what this medication is? No, I don't. Well, this is actually a very addictive substance. It's very strong. It's really for severe pain only. You should think about, I don't want it.
Some people
I
don't
was like,
take the meds.
sure, take it just in case. She said, I don't want, she's like, my pain is not that bad. I appreciate you letting me know. And now here's somebody 3 weeks of taking this medication. They can become hooked, right? Not addicted, but
Become reliant on the substance.
right. So you end up causing. I'm having a brain fart right now, but so there's addiction, which is a psychological component of the addiction world, where you want to actively take this medication, right? Or not medication, any drug, seek out any drug, and there's abuse where you're abusing it, taking it beyond what you need, correct? And dependence is the other part of it, where you might not be addicted, you might not be abusing, but your body depends on it because it becomes psychologically or physiologically dependent on it. So this person, like her, taking it for 3 weeks can become dependent on this medication. So after she's done, now she needs it, not because she wants it, but here you are, you put this patient, you didn't even ask, you didn't even educate her. Let's talk about your risk, your pain. Tylenol, Motrin might be enough for you. And like you said,
you set them up for failure. At
so
that
there's a
point.
lot of failure on that safety valve side. But I want to speak to you on the perspective of getting these people help. It is not easy. Half of these, I'd say more than half of these clinics that are supposed to be, helping people get off substance abuse, right? Rehabs, they're in it for profit. So when you're a returning customer, I make more money off you, right? So even though they might be doing the by the book stuff, they're not really doing. Again, you'd assume, like somebody that say sets up a clinic with passion that really wants to get people out of this, cycle that they're in. It's not easy, man. You have to change your entire outlook on life, which is not an easy thing to do. And you're just trying to pump them with alternative medications or get them clean. They're gonna go right back out and make that same decision. So it's very difficult to get somebody to make that change in their life. You've seen people, people. How hard is it for someone to change?
It's hard, and I think in our community as well, you got to have that support system. It takes a village.
Family is huge.
Family is huge, and if your family is not there to support you when you're there during times of crisis, even your faith, right? When you're going through
100%.
times of crisis, that you're going to be
100%.
able to fight through adversity, take myself into an inpatient facility and get the help I need, and know that nobody's going to come and shame me because I'm
100%.
receiving this.
So
help.
To be fair to the families, right? To that point on the families,
They're not equipped. Some of them are not equipped.
So it's a whole educational process.
No,
you
you're
got to
right.
educate.
I agree. Sometimes we put blame on the family, but they don't actually know
they're doing the best they can.
how to
I
proceed,
agree.
how to
I
proceed
agree
with this.
with Bez,
It's
yeah.
tough, and
Yesterday I was in Dearborn Heights. Yesterday, and there was a. She wasn't Middle Eastern. She was just a white woman who walked in. She's like, "Are you a lawyer?" I said, "Yeah, I am." She goes, "Okay, well, my son is back there. I already got a lawyer, but I swear to God, one more time, and they're gonna have to lock me up for what I'm gonna do to him." And I told her, "It's okay. You're a good mother. You're doing
Yeah,
your best.
right.
And so it's hard. And now it's that issue of, does she have what she needs as a mother to help her son? It's hard.
look, it comes back to it's way deeper, right? In terms of actually, modern day raising a family, having that healthy family culture. It's not easy, and a lot of people are doing things wrong, and they don't even realize it. I say this as myself, as a father of 3, married. It's so difficult, man, to stay paying attention to every little detail in your family and raising your kids the right way and creating that perfect that environment that would result in a healthy family, but
Flourishing.
100%.
That's
but
why the nuclear family is so important.
It's huge.
And it's important that you implement those faith-based ideals into your children. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I read that in Vietnam there were soldiers that were addicted to morphine because again you're put in this war, you were drafted, yada yada, and now you're in this place where you're without your family, you're in war, you're watching people die that you were close to you, so they get hooked to morphine,
Right.
and they go full blown addiction to morphine, and a few of them when they came back, just seeing their family, being around their family, cold turkey. They were able to get out of it, and that's how important family is as a structure, right? But if you have a dysfunctional family already, right, now you're missing a key component to your recovery.
Right. And this, I don't want to throw defense attorneys under the bus, but Bazzi does a good job of this. Like he said, a lot of these individuals make contact with the criminal justice system, right? It could start off with a simple possession case of them having a few Xanax on them, right? But a lot of defense attorneys, they look at it as like, listen, let me get the best result for my client, whether that's getting them this favorable plea and forgetting about the part of, hey, let's try to get them some help. Let's try to get them into drug court. Let's see if there's any type of additional resources that we could provide my client in order for them to get on the right track, right? So I think that's, it's good lawyering to get the best outcome, but you also gotta have that integrity to be like, hey, I gotta go that extra step, to take care of this guy. He's somebody that's young. He's part of our community. They're the youth, you know what I mean, that are the future of this country. So Bazzi always does that. He always comes and asks me, anytime he got a client, is there any type of sobriety court?
Right.
Could I put him in any type of inpatient treatment, right? So that's very important.
And to that point, so you can have the best of both worlds. I'll give you an example. On like a simple possession charge, like a misdemeanor, for example, that's charged under like a city ordinance, you can maybe knock it down. This is, depending on the circumstances, you can maybe get it down to a civil infraction, right? Which is, think about it like a parking ticket, a speeding ticket, right? So you could take it from that misdemeanor to the civil infraction. But even in doing that, right, as an attorney, when I have that client, if I believe that there is a problem, I try to talk to my clients about it, right? And I try to say, hey, what's going on? Because you'd be amazed. I'll give a client my ear for 20 or 30 minutes, and they're checking in with me like 2 weeks later, after the case is resolved, everything is done and over with, and they'll check in and say, hey, how are you? What's going on? And sometimes, we'll try to reach out to clients after the fact too, checking in, how was everything, et cetera, because we try to build that relationship, right? Because at the end of the day, I know we're not really talking about it, but my firm, we consider ourselves to be like a community firm, right? We're there for the community, with the community. We're comprised of individuals who are from the Arab American community, from the African American community. And we're a minority owned and operated firm.
Absolutely. And on the prosecution side, when you got a case, 20-year-old has no criminal history, I want to get this guy help, right? I don't want to go guns blazing on him. This is not a case where I'm recovering 10 ounces of coke.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's different sides of the spectrum. Right? There's these
100%.
low-level misdemeanors that these kids are just users. They're trying to get the help, and it's our responsibility to get them the help necessary. It's not always about the money all the time. It's not always about, hey, I got another client. Right? It's about getting these kids help, and it's an amana at the end of the day.
100%.
Good karma. You put good karma out there, man. You help people. You take care of people. People appreciate it.
And Hassan will come to me and sometimes explain to me, man, the story of this kid. Maybe he's a single-family household, right? He's going through it. They have financial issues. So you want to help. You know what I mean? You don't want him to go down this rabbit hole of destruction.
A big part of that, of the stigma that addicts have, goes back to Purdue Pharma. So Purdue Pharma is a pharmaceutical company that created OxyContin. And they're actually the reason why OxyContin blew up, right? They used to have, very bad practices of basically working with doctors to just get this overly prescribed. And they ended up, government ended up coming after them. And but something that they did was, as soon as the attention was on them, like, hey, there's an addiction issue, like this thing just blew the hell up, right? And when it became that crisis mode and people were eyes are first on who's producing this medication, they immediately started saying, the game plan was blame the addict. It's not the medication. It's not our practice. It's these addicts. They're the reason. They're the ones. And then there was this whole propaganda campaign against addicts, and then addicts became, rather than us seeing them as people who need help, it became they're villains. They're
It's like tobacco.
100%.
Because only recently, for example, everybody used to smoke cigarettes. Marlboro Light short in a box.
100%.
Marlboro Reds.
It's crazy what they could do. And look, I'm a big component of personal responsibility. I still think you as an addict have a personal responsibility for putting yourself in that position. And it's your responsibility and only your responsibility to get out, right? But I feel like
as a society, though, you see, here's
we do have a...
Because we benefit from it.
100%.
When you can bring somebody back, we benefit as a whole.
Right.
Right. And so that becomes a key part.
Right.
I'm a big guy. I know Omar's thing is deterrence.
Right.
Well, I'm a big rehabilitation. I believe in that. And so I get that sometimes
But what are the resources for that?
And I think like I said, it all just depends. Are you talking about a small possession case, or are you talking about an armed robbery? You're talking about a possession with intent to distribute, right? So we want the deterrence when it comes to somebody that's selling dope in our community, without a doubt. We want to use all our resources in order to stop that, But the resources should be catered towards the individuals that need substance abuse help.
You see these other very liberal cities that have clean needles, right? You go to European countries, they actually put clean needles in public bathrooms, so to spread this, the spread of HIV and Hep C from injectables. But at what point you're actually helping?
You're incentivizing.
And I'm not like attacking anybody.
You think you're enabling?
No, I'm saying this is a conversation that needs to be had. There's a balance between enabling drug users and then also trying to solve a symptom of drug abuse.
Exactly.
So
it does. It incentivizes them. And I think it's also important to note that what form of deterrence is out there to stop this? There isn't anything.
There isn't, but I guess the societal question that I'm posing
prosecution in of itself is a form of deterrence.
It is a form of deterrence.
But you know what else is a form of deterrence?
Death?
Somebody, 100%. That is the greatest form of I know it sounds horrible, but the point I'm making is, do you know how many people who are addicted to say, oxycodone, right? The Percocet, they're taking these, what's it called? and they're not getting what they want from it anymore. So the next level up is to inject heroin, right? It's cheaper and you can get it, but they're afraid of the consequences of injecting a dirty needle, injecting fentanyl, injecting all these. These are all actually deterrents to stop them from making the next step.
I hear you, but what we have to do is we have to put ourselves in the position of the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the cousin, the friend of the drug user, right? And I'm not a proponent of drug use. I don't.
No, of course not.
Obviously, I don't
Absolutely
push
not.
for heroin and crack and well, crack isn't really all that prominent in our community, but pills and whatnot. I don't push for that. I don't want to see the young generation, the old generation. I don't want to see anybody that's addicted to any kind of substance, right?
100%.
But you gotta ask yourself. Like I kind of made a joke, but I wasn't. So would you rather them be dead, right? So you have to make it available. Now maybe next to the Narcan machine, and maybe I'm living in a world where everything is just ideal and perfect, which we live in an imperfect world. But maybe next to the Narcan machine, you can have a resource center.
No, I actually think they did. They had get help flyers. So again, the intention is pure and it's good, and I love the idea at face value. But this is my idea. My point is we need to really extrapolate through it. This Narcan machine, when I went to see it, I actually went because I was interested, and it's cleaned out, right? And I'm gonna tell you, this comes back to human nature and human behavior, right? The idea is good. It's almost like there's poor people out there. Oh, would you rather the poor people starve, or should we give free food? Right? You give free food. Eventually, you're gonna have people who are greedy involved. This is just the reality of human nature, which makes it so hard to delegate.
It's a little bit of reliance.
To balance. I'll give you an example. Another example, just to kind of pose this question, is prostitution. Right? The dangers of prostitution is STDs. So there are countries who've gone with this idea of
the red light districts and all that.
So you have this, rather than this, go through a prostitution clinic where women are tested, and then now you can go pay. Right now you're allowing prostitution. Now that person who would have never went with a prostitute didn't even cross his mind because he's afraid of what can come with it. Now he thinks,
but
I can do it.
You know what the rationale behind that is? The rationale behind that is for the safety of the woman.
That's true too. You're right. You end up making it how safe can it really be, right? You're right. Safety in terms of not putting them in danger. It's not a crime anymore, right?
Yeah.
You've taken the criminal aspect out of it. But it's more of, my point is, now you're making it more okay to do, so more people will do it. Look at marijuana. It was illegal. Now a lot more people smoke marijuana in Michigan than would have, right? Yes, you've taken the criminalization aspect of it out of it. It's probably safer now than it was in terms of, I'm not sure if that's true or not. But now you've made it accessible to more people. It's the way society works. If you make it easier to do,
but look at
people
alcohol.
will do it.
What do you think of alcohol? Forget, and I understand that we're three Muslim men sitting here right now, but what do you think of alcohol in American society or in any society, in Western society in general?
It's right. And how many DUIs do you have? I've seen in the hospital how many young men come in with livers that are shot, they're dead. And I remember actually having to calculate how much the lifespan. There's an exact calculation you do of the lifespan of that person, and I'm sitting here looking at a 29-year-old who has a lifespan of 6 months, and they're not going to get another liver. Why? Because they're an alcoholic. So they would not give him a liver over somebody. So it's yes.
But would you propose banning alcohol? Because that's prohibition, But
right. So but would banning alcohol prevent deaths? I think it would.
Yeah.
DUIs? I think it would.
But
you know what I mean?
But the solution is probably not to ban it because it's something that's not realistic. You know what I mean? You're not going to ultimately be able to. It's just like the gun problem, right?
I mean, everything's realistic till it's not.
Okay, but here's the thing: you got to look at alcohol is kind of universal, though. But you also have to look when you take certain preventative measures, or when you're banning a substance, or if you're banning a practice or whatever. When you're implementing a new policy, right?
Right.
You got to look at who ultimately is targeted as a result of this, right?
No, 100%.
And I think you probably know where I'm going with this. So let's say marijuana was illegal, right, for a very long period of time, and so what was the result of that? Convictions, where in a majority of individuals, I'll just take the position and say it, that, minorities, right? It's prominent marijuana use among minorities,
Right.
and that resulted in a ton of convictions, and you had people going to prison,
Right.
for marijuana use.
100%.
We're not talking about the guy that's smuggling, across the border, as Omar was talking about earlier. But was that fair? Was that just? Was society better off? I don't know.
Again, this is why I say I don't claim to know the answer. You know what I mean?
It's tough. These are tough questions.
It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress for sure.
It's posing the answer, but this is.
And obviously, there's a huge difference. I'm not trying to give you that question, and and trying to liken the use of marijuana with
To opioids.
with
100%.
opioids
Yeah,
or heroin
100%,
or,
or alcohol.
Yeah.
It's to my idea that I'm trying to bring back is sometimes, especially with more liberal policies, you intend to do good, but you end up causing harm.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And if not thought through, thoroughly, you end up having issues and symptoms of that policy that end up, hurting. And I would actually love to take a visit there one day again and see if there are, Narcans still available, because I would love to hear from somebody that knows if it was a successful project.
It's detrimental, and it bleeds over into the criminal justice system. You know what I mean? Like I said, and I'll always preach on this. The common denominator in 90% of the crimes that are committed is drug use. You know what I mean? They're committing crimes while under the influence of narcotics, of alcohol, whatever the case may be. So, they align with each other, and it's an issue that we have to deal with on both sides.
In pharmacy school, we had a pharmacist drug addict come visit us and give us, talk to us about his experience.
The pharmacist was a drug
He
addict?
was a pharmacist, ended up becoming a drug addict, and just kind of thought that experience. And he said, "What would you ask me? What I wish could be done?" He said, "I wish I could use drugs without any consequences." He said, "That would be my dream." And I think that's the mentality of the majority of drug abusers. So I feel like the more we take away the consequences of the drugs, the more likely people will keep using.
Absolutely.
But that issue was there before, and if it still exists, see, you
Yeah,
talk
it's
about
not
liberal.
about-
Hold on, well, you talk about liberal policy, right? Okay, I understand, but it was an issue that existed before, and now it's just been brought to the forefront. And
But that issue can get worse.
it can get worse, right? But and I don't know if it has or hasn't gotten worse. I don't.
Oh, it
I know
definitely has. It
but-
definitely has.
Yeah, and
Statistics show that it's gotten a lot worse.
specifically talking about opioid use.
Yeah, opioid use, absolutely.
Sure, that I can understand, and I accept that. But my point is, we got to do something to mitigate, because if it's not possible to totally eliminate, you gotta mitigate. Not,
Yeah, absolutely.
So so what does it look like to try and lessen the, not burden, but to make it a little bit better, right? And I don't know the answer, I guess, but maybe Narcan is a start to step in
No,
the right
Narcan.
direction.
I'm a big proponent of Narcan.
I know, but
and
I'm
love
talking
the
about
idea.
the way that it's being deployed.
So like I, as a pharmacist, I used to dispense it. You give it to people, right? When you have to come and give your name, right? If you're a father whose son is a drug addict, so you want to have that in your household, you're not afraid to come give your name, put everything on paper. You've gotten it dispensed. You go. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that, because you're sitting here worried about your child, right? But when you're a drug addict, you're automatically shamed, and you feel like you don't want to go through that process.
Right.
Of,
There's a stigma.
right? Because it's still available. Any pharmacy would give it to you. So it's still available. Or if you're somebody who's trying to give up narcotics, you're on that journey of giving it up. You don't. So you know what I mean. You're willing to go out above and beyond.
And I'm gonna say this probably until I turn purple, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to law enforcement. It all comes down to preventative measures. Why are these drugs on the street? You know what I mean? Why are these opioids on the street to begin with? So if we're not gonna take a proactive approach in funding the necessary resources with law enforcement in order to combat this, I think we're just going to get into, like I said, we're just dealing with the symptoms at this point. Because why are these narcotics on the street?
I agree with
Why
you.
are these medical professionals prescribing these meds? Why are there's all this fentanyl all over Wayne, all over the nation?
Right.
You know what I mean? So
To push back on that, how successful was the war on drugs? Right? It wasn't at all. Right? Drugs just have gotten worse, but all you did is criminalize people who probably shouldn't have been criminalized, right? The
people
users,
that needed help.
people that needed help, right? And I know you're against that and you're opposed to that. It's just, it's how much can you do? I'm with you on the border part. We could definitely do more on the border, but people will get drugs in, and it's just going to continue to happen. I think the best approach is to focus on people, on society, to just push, you know what I mean? Get people to understand what these effects of drugs are, educate people, educate families on how to, I'll tell you one thing that's huge. A lot of families, a lot of people, man. I've sat with people where I'm looking at one of their friends and I know something's up.
Yep.
You see it, you see the signs. But if people who have never been around it, they don't know. Oh, I'm just tired. I didn't sleep.
Absolutely.
And now they just, it's my family member. Why would they, But you educate family members on seeing that. Why does my son always want to leave to the next room and hang out? He's not sitting with the family.
Something doesn't add up.
Why is he always sleeping? Why is he always out in the middle of the night? Like, you see these signs and you can stop it before it becomes a real issue.
And I love what you just said. And I think there needs to be a whole educational campaign, especially in the Arab American Muslim community, right? Because they're not aware of what should we see? What are these signs that we're supposed to see in our children? Are we paying attention enough? Is he just acting mysterious or curious for a specific reason? But that ultimately comes down, and like I'll say this, I'll chirp the conservative values until I die. Like it comes down to the nuclear family. It comes down to protecting the household
And
having faith in the
100%,
house,
100%.
having the ability to have a strong foundation
moral
at home.
Yep, a moral system.
Right, because nobody's gonna stop these type of things from happening. Right,
I'll
the
tell you
drugs are gonna
this.
flow. People are gonna use drugs, but do we have the resources necessary to combat these issues? Do we have the faith inside of the home to help us get through these issues?
And there is nothing wrong with drug testing your kids.
Nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong with it. I feel like people don't want to. It's all about how you approach it.
Yeah.
If
You're saying when necessary, obviously. I mean,
What do you mean?
Or is it like a parenting policy? You walk in every day, you get
To
back
be
from
honest,
school.
it depends.
Be in this cup.
It
It's
depends
tough.
on you. It depends on you as a parent. If you want to go right off the bat and you talk to your kids honestly, I love you guys. I trust you guys. There's nothing wrong with it. But because I love you guys,
Pee in this cup?
I might randomly drug test you, and it's not because I don't trust you or I think anything is going on. It's just a system that I've implemented and I've seen what's out there. This is how I'm going to make sure my family's
But I
safe.
think
Yeah, honestly,
just having that conversation that you just
It's
had
gonna deter them.
is going to deter.
You don't
them.
even. You might not even have to drug test them, but them knowing
Having
that, oh, my
that
dad will-
conversation. Hell yeah.
It might even prevent them from smoking weed. Because holy shit, my dad's gonna.
What are the implications? What is going to happen if I expose myself to these narcotics? That's a conversation that should be had in every household in America, predominantly in the Arab American Muslim community,
100%.
because everything is being hidden.
And I feel like
And to be like, just so we can put it out there, I think everybody.
why not? Why not?
it's-
Sorry, why not give away free drug tests
Yeah, I mean that.
as opposed to right? So I understand on the other side save lives, and on this side save them before they need to
Be
be saved.
proactive.
Yeah,
Take
be
a
proactive.
proactive.
You know what I
approach.
think the key is with society is so we believe that we disagree on so many different things, right? That's especially right now, politics and whatnot. It's a hot topic.
It is.
Right. But I think there's certain things that everyone can agree on, right? And one of those things is, for example, hey, look, there's no reason that drugs should be in our schools. There's no reason that our kids
100%.
need to be exposed to this type of thing, right? And what are the measures which we're taking to ensure that it doesn't bleed in? You know, it starts, with like gateway drugs and then just
Right.
evolves into something greater and a bigger problem. And I think that sometimes the problem we have as a society, especially nowadays, is we're always trying to look at the things that we disagree on. But I think if we were to come together and say, hey, look, this is an issue, let's tackle it together. Doesn't matter left, right, liberal, conservative, whatever it is. It'd be beneficial to everyone.
Right. So the issue then becomes how. You know what I mean? And that's where it becomes.
You know what I think it is, and a lot of it has to do with this. It's like the older generation setting the example for the younger generation. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's lacking in society today, and especially in our community. We don't have nobody pays attention to the youth. I meet a lot of the Yemeni kids at the masajid and whatnot, and they're lost. They don't have that person to go to talk about education. What am I doing in school? Who am I hanging out with?
100%.
These conversations are not even being had. You know what I mean? So I think it's upon us. It's a responsibility for us as the upcoming generation to have that conversation with them.
When you say us, can you clarify? Do you mean the family or
The
do you mean-
family, the community members.
It's difficult, man. I think the cure for all societal problems starts at the family. If everybody can fix it within their own family, it's not.
I think that's where the greatest responsibility lies. I think that you have to take. We talk about you made a statement earlier, right? You said, "Hey, listen, the drug abuser, it's on him or her, right? It's on them. You have to do it. You. I think that sometimes, especially now, we blame everyone else and everything else,
Ourselves.
and we don't want to look at what we could have done, how we could have prevented it.
No, 100%.
And I'm not trying to say that the father or the mother that lost a child, it's their fault. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in turn, we can't say, oh, it's all outside. You have to say
See,
what.
I want to push back on that. You say it's not their fault, right? And I would never want to blame. But truth, you have to examine it for what it is. How much blame does go on the parents? How much
case by
blame?
case,
Right,
case by
of
case
course,
basis, yeah.
exactly. So, and maybe that's the reason why our community is so ashamed to publicly say my child has a mental health issue, has addiction, because internally we know some of that blame does go back onto us as parents, right? What part of you was negligent? What part of you was focused on whatever you were watching, or your politics in your family with the issues that you have with your family members and all of that, that you've neglected your child because you didn't see any red line or red flags. So again, to really find the truth, I feel like you do have to say those things that may seem controversial. I'm not here saying it's always the parents'
Sure.
fault.
No, of
I'm
course
saying
not. Of course not.
that question needs to be asked, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask those types of questions.
No.
And it's again,
and
it's a sensitive topic.
Sometimes it's important for even parents to step back and take accountability and see how they could grow and move forward, right? Because our parents they're immigrant parents. My dad didn't know anything when he came to this country, right? He doesn't understand how the school systems work, how the kids are interacting nowadays. So it's their responsibility to educate themselves on the issues, right?
Look at us generationally; it's changed, right? We raised here, but the generation after us, like, it's hard to relate to them.
Right.
So you don't understand the dynamics between them, and you know what I mean. And back then it was, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but now the village is burning. So you have a lot more responsibility as a parent to make sure. And again, it's difficult to say, but I promise you this. No, even though it's not said up front, any parent that has a child that's addicted or criminal or all this, I promise you they put blame on themselves. Somewhere along the line,
Of course.
they do. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's really not their fault, but it's that's where the shame comes of admitting my child has,
It's
an addiction
And
problem.
I think sometimes what happens is when it comes time to say it, unfortunately, if it's too late at that point, that's when they say, "Khalas, let's just move past it." Because they're coping, right?
Right,
With the
100%.
loss. If we're going to the extreme of the loss of life, right? So they're coping with it, and so then they're at a crossroads. Do they go to the majma or the jami', and get up and say this is what happened, or do they say close the door?
It's an
just
emotional
more-
roller
yeah.
coaster.
It's
an emotional
kind of
roller
unfair
coaster
to
for the
feel like
family.
you're gonna learn off of my back, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the selflessness comes from. Is you get up and say, learn from my mistake. Don't wait till it's too late. See the signs early. Speak up about it. Be honest. But it's difficult.
But okay, so have you guys heard of like, for example, 6 degrees of separation?
Yes.
Okay, so I think maybe we're taking too broad of an approach, right? I think that even a conversation had with just the neighbor, about the issue, because everybody has their circles, right? So obviously,
Right. You don't have to go publicly announce it
Right.
in front of everybody, but speak to someone.
They say if you can touch 6 people, you touch the entire world, right? And so I think maybe that's a solution.
You're right. And now you have people, right? So he might run into him at a pharmacy trying to get scripts under somebody else's name. Now your neighbor's like, yo, I saw your son. What's going on? I know you told me about this issue. I saw a car pull up in the middle of the night. Just check on your son, type of thing. And it really does take a village.
It does.
And another thing is, so like I'm married, right? I have a kid and whatnot, and it changes your perspective, right? When you have a child, for example, and you have 3, Allah khalilak yon, right? 3 children,
Yes,
I believe.
alhamdulillah, yeah.
Okay, it changes the way you think about things, and your priorities change, and where your mind is. Now all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, my child. I know your kids are relatively young, right?
Yeah.
But maybe they're in elementary or whatnot.
Right.
And now middle schools after that, high schools after that.
I'm afraid, bro.
And
I'm
you're
terrified.
Yeah, and
It's
you
the
could
truth.
speak to that. You could speak to that.
It's the truth. It's you're sitting here because I went to one of my nephew's football games in middle school, and I'm just looking around. I'm like, what a different world middle school is compared to elementary school. And now I'm sitting here thinking how innocent my child is, and they're going to be exposed to all this, right? All this stuff that I think goes way beyond these kids' age at middle school. But they try to grow up early. I guess they try to grow up fast. But then you start seeing the boyfriend, girlfriend. You see like when I see teachers, the way they're being like there's certain teachers I think they take their role model approach that they shouldn't. You know what I mean? They want to be friends with these kids and end up trying to be cool to the kids rather than showing.
They're no longer a figure of authority.
Exactly. Rather than showing, no, they are, but they're adapting to what the kids think is cool, rather than setting the tone of, hey, I'm a cool teacher, well, you can be cool in this way too. You know what I mean? You don't have to be, X, Y, Z, or the tendencies that you see with.
And I think a lot of kids now they have a huge identity crisis. They don't know who they are. You know what I mean? I think that plays a role with experimenting and try to find themselves or trying to find themselves. Right. And again, it's important that we have the faith-based principles in our homes. Right. You know what I mean?
100%. I agree with you 100%.
It sets the framework for
Set the
everybody's
moral
life.
guideline. And the less people do that, because they're afraid, they don't want to get canceled.
Having that uncomfortable conversation is so important, you know, and it's with whatever you do. Me and Hussein talk about this all the time, like putting yourself in an uncomfortable position and be able to work yourself through it.
That's how you grow.
Yep, that's how you grow as a human. And then again, you know, I just want to say thank you, because you put out this platform, you give the ability to individuals to come here and speak freely, and that's what this country is all about at the end of the
No,
day.
I appreciate
Absolutely,
you.
man.
Yeah,
We
thank
really
you,
appreciate
Hussein.
you having us. Appreciate
Thank you,
you.
Ahmad. You guys have been amazing guests. It's been an awesome, enlightening conversation, and I hope people benefit from it. And that's it. That's all, folks.
You can't afford to lose. 313-788-8888.